Hey everyone, really excited to get in here today, talking about a few things that are near and dear to my heart as a CRO specialist. Uh, with some help of Elevar, we put together this presentation on how we genuinely turn customer research into a feedback loop that ultimately leads to really high-performing, winning Shopify stores. So there's a lot to get into, really eager to do so. So let's just dive right in. So I want to set the stage from the jump of what happens with stores who do not do this. And the simple answer is they are leaving probably 10 to 15% of revenue on the table for every visitor to their site. That doesn't necessarily sound like that much, but when you're looking at, like the example here, an extra 50 to 70 cents over the millions of users that every big store has on a monthly basis, that is gargantuan and it absolutely undercuts the revenue potential of a Shopify store. So in our estimation, this is a huge opportunity. Most stores miss it. Most stores have this information sitting around waiting for them to use, or it's very easy to collect. So I am here to show you how to make the most of this and to really share what we consider at Enavi our secret sauce to e-commerce success. So why listen to me? Despite being a dude with a profile picture here, who is Enavi? Why should you care? Simple version is we are a CRO agency that lives and breathes Shopify CRO. We have worked with clients from a couple million up to a couple hundred of million. Our calling card is, and what we're known for most people, is the intra-site funnel. It is getting very granular with data. It is getting into the weeds, turning data into insight, into direction, and a focus on the store. That is the first part of what we do. What I'm about to talk to you here today is the part we don't speak to nearly as much publicly, but it is absolutely the successful secret sauce for us as an agency that gets reliable, consistent double-digit revenue per user increases time and time again. So let's dive in. What we're covering here today and what I would really want anyone watching this to take away from this is understanding the problem with how most brands use or don't use customer research, how you can actually play offense with this and with your store and create feedback loops so that your store is constantly evolving as it needs to in a way that yields positive business outcomes. And then end it with a couple of real examples of what we've used for customer research, how it's kind of come together, and the results it has generated, at least in like a small snapshot for a few stores that we work with. So the first part, how most brands use customer research. Most don't, to be honest. Yeah, research for most stores that we have found after talking with dozens and dozens and dozens, it generally falls into two categories if you're talking about research. They will do a post-purchase survey for a how did you hear about us, just so they can have some attribution, check their sources on like their paid traffic. That is one aspect. The other side is a CEO or C-suite or investor figure comes in and wants to do an external customer market research project. That is generally very glossy. It is generally not very actionable. So both of these things combined together, they can lead to a lot of some decks, they can lead to some ideas, but as far as actually adapting your on-site experience based on them, almost nothing comes from it. So what happens as a result? At some point in the future, after that, a brand starts to see their store performance dip a bit. They get a little worried, either a conversion rate's trending down, their traffic is not where it needs to be, perhaps their cost per click or acquisition costs, they're going up. They panic, they need to get more out of their store. They don't quite know what that means, they just know they need to do it. So with nothing else to fall back on, here's what happens. They go into their store, they're like, okay, we need to make the site better. So what we're going to do is guess at what matters most to customers in the minds of internal teams that are way too close to the product that probably haven't actually spoken to a customer unless it's a customer support issue for quite some time. Or they blindly start copying competitors. They are very, very indexed to their competitors' desktop experiences. If they did something cool, they want it on their site. They don't know if it works. They don't know the underlying data. Oftentimes, that thing that they're trying to copy might not even be working, but they want it. Or the third option here is probably the most detrimental in many cases, is immediately defaulting to adding expensive tools. This leads to a lot of tech stack bloat. It adds significantly to margins and can really gunk up the works. And oftentimes, all it's doing is slowing your site down, stealing conversions or attribution to conversions that were already going to happen at best, or at worst, it starts to genuinely get in the way and impede progress of customers towards your actual goal of conversion. None of it's good. So what we recommend, and the phrase I consistently use, is that we want you to play offense with your store. We want you to be proactive, not reactive. We want you to understand which parts of the site are working and which are safe to ignore. There is a very strong likelihood that 75% of your site is working just fine. You can ignore it. You can push it to the side, check on it occasionally, look back in a quarter, see how it's doing. But for the most part, you can safely say, like, our cart, our checkout, that's fine. We need to zero in on the PDP. That is the first part. The second part, so what we're going to really zero in on here, is using that narrower focus and then taking that with customer data and proactively seeking out the data points, the insights, the things that will really allow you to tailor experiences to exactly what a customer needs to see to feel comfortable purchasing on your site. We call this the conversion block. It is a proxy for so much more research that we could go into, but it is a great jumping off point that if you can know these handful of data points, of insights, you will almost accidentally run into higher revenues from every visitor to your store. So the conversion block, this is an internal data point, an idea that we use that we try to search out for on every store. Sometimes it is globally and we're looking across the entire site. Sometimes we zero in on single products. Sometimes it's product types. Regardless, it is just a way for you to start filling in the blanks of what you don't know about customers in a way that you can actually take action on it and know where to apply it to. So as far as what it looks like, there's kind of 4 quadrants to it, and it goes in a clockwise manner. It is very simple in its application, and it rhymes a lot with a jobs to be done framework. So what are we trying to do with this? What are we trying to learn? The first thing, very simply, what problem is a customer looking to make better? Like, there's a reason they started searching for a product like yours. What is it? What outcome do they need to have? What desire? What result? Something about that happened in their lives and they are looking to solve it through a purchase. That can apply in many directions, but this is one that is foundational, that if you can nail it on site, it can influence everything, but especially things like image galleries, testimonials, ads, copy. All of this is fair game, but it's the sort of thing that we want a customer to land on the site and for them to immediately recognize, okay, these guys know what they're talking about. Like, they understand what I am trying to accomplish, and I don't need to worry about can they live up to their end of the bargain. That is ultimately the goal of the first step, the push. The pull is very simply what attracts them to this type of product or your brand or this type of solution. They have a problem. There is something that will be drawing them towards you. They're not accidentally discovering your site. They're either an ad or a search or an email, something about it got them to their incentive to kind of perk up, to start to think about it, and something about your selling points, your perceived benefits of your product, or just the uniqueness of your brand. was enough to get their attention. That is very important to know, because if you know that, then you can amplify it. That can, again, go into your elevator pitch, the benefits you show in like your USVP blocks, or well, USP blocks, image galleries, etc. You can go wild with it, but it's when you know what that is, you don't have to be maximalist with it. You can be very minimally invasive, but do so in a way that everything just kind of resonates intuitively for them. On the bottom half of this is where we have to overcome some things. First one, anxiety. Like something about them makes this, wow, something about this makes them nervous. This could be like they don't fully understand how the product works, or they don't know that your brand is uniquely the one that they need to go for. It could be that they don't trust they're going to get the product quick enough. There are a lot of things in there that are impeding their flow towards purchase. You need to know which ones are most pertinent and which ones you need to address most aggressively. If you can do so, it's really, really easy to proactively put this into a product page or a landing page or even into the cart and allow them to feel very, very confident as they get closer to purchase. The last one, the habit. This is the status quo, and this is one I think everyone kind of forgets. When brands think about their competitors and like other options for purchase, they're thinking very linearly. It is exclusively, we sell jeans, this brand sells jeans. Like that's the only other option. There's also people who don't want to buy jeans, or they could go to buy shorts. They could go a different direction. In most cases, it is a status quo of either doing nothing, buying from Amazon, buying something dirt cheap from somewhere else. It is a much more broad spectrum of alternative options that need to be addressed. And a lot of times it is more around basically doing nothing. What does that look like for them? How critical is this for them to solve? If you can intuitively understand that and explain that if you don't make this jump right now, here's what's going to happen. If you can get that in there within the product description, within the FAQs, you can really up the pain in a way that gets them off the fence and actually taking action. So there's a lot of applications for these. This can go in almost every single part of the site. However, when we're thinking about applying this, the core of this idea is not to narrow in and if X, then Y. It is starting to get a language and a feedback loop in place where you can instinctively understand how to apply this. Like any of those insights, even if you get one or two of them right, it can apply to your navigation menu, how you do a homepage layout, your shop by sections, like shop by category, shop by featured products, how you gently nudge people to the site. All of that is fair game. The core part is not to be formulaic with it, is literally to start you thinking of, we know these issues, here's the canvas on which we can paint on our site, and here's how we do so. And if you can get that process going, it gets really easy to adopt and implement these things, even if you don't feel like you are a perceived CRO expert or someone who is really, really in the weeds. So I could talk for days on this one. I would actually recommend, if you're going to start with this though, here are 4 very easy places to start that most brands could do on a dime and will get you the biggest bang for your buck from these sorts of activities straight away. The first one is very near and dear to my heart, image gallery content. I have seen this work so well for so many brands, and I am increasingly convinced that it is years of training from Amazon now has people thinking very image first when they're shopping, especially on mobile, where it used to be that we would treat an image gallery very stylized. It would be very brand centric, a lot of studio shots, kind of glossy. I don't see that work particularly well anymore. The brands we work with, it is a mix of, sure, you have some studio shots, you have in-scale images, you have the product being used. The one that I really love, though, is what I demonstrate here, are annotated images. This is one that Amazon-style content, they definitely do this. I stole this idea originally from some physical print catalogs that I get sent all the time randomly, but it's connecting the dots between the features of the product and the benefit that you are trying to make sure that the customer receives. If you can do that and like have one or two things called out, especially like in this example where it is very zoomed in, and just make it staggeringly obvious how this works, that resonates so well. And the more you can get people to interact with the image gallery, that is positively correlated with increases in cart rates, revenue per user, all of that. And increasingly as well, we see that users, frankly, anything that's below, like further down the page, they kind of tune out, or at best they scan. But if you can get your full sales pitch across in an image gallery, that is absolutely fantastic. And some people will be visual learners, some will be written, like text-based learners. But if you can get this, then you give yourself the absolute best chance of resonating, connecting the dots between a pre and a post-look experience, and all good things come from this one. The second one here is one that some brands use this, many do not, and it's short descriptions, headlines. Sometimes we call it an elevator pitch, copy and bullets. Call it what you will. Clear and concise copy wins. It does phenomenally well at communicating to a customer why they need to buy and overcoming the objections proactively. 2 to 3 lines of very customer-centric copy, especially if it is dialed in on known benefits or outcomes they are trying to derive, is absolutely going to move the needle. I could sit here and spout off dozens of examples of these sorts of tests that have a double-digit increase in add to cart rates just from a few lines of text. I don't think there is any true magic to the UX. I think it is principally the forced clarity. It requires you, when you do this, to cut the fluff. You get rid of the spec-heavy, brand-centric content, and forces you to do so in a way that you are taking language from customers and communicating it back to them in a way that is very digestible. So if you dial in from like customer reviews, looking at post-purchase surveys, support tickets, marry all that together with the most common things that come out of that, and just frankly bulk copy and paste some of that in here, you can absolutely see a huge jump just from what looks like a very minimally invasive tweak to the site. All right, the third one. This is much more anxiety inducing and requires a little bit more effort, but it's absolutely overlooked by many teams, and that is FAQs. They, almost every scenario we see, if there is an FAQ on a product page, it is an afterthought. It is something that was thrown together with some random stuff that no one's ever actually asked, and it doesn't do anything. If you can flip that on its head a bit and have a curated FAQ section, even if it's literally just going to your support team and asking them, hey, for this Johnny the Fox product, what are like the 3 to 4 things that you guys are always getting hit up on that you would love just be able to point people to on the website, and get those in there and have that be 4 or 5 of the 6 elements in an FAQ. That alone can be enough to get you great results up front, because it's proactively answering customer questions without them having to go to a different page on the site to find them, or perhaps leaving the site and searching elsewhere for answers. That is a huge help. It has knock-on effects from the conversion standpoint. We can get directional data on this to see if, say, it's the warranty that is the thing that absolutely gets people to add to cart at a higher rate than anything else. Okay, let's amplify that. Like, let's put that at the top of the list. Let's perhaps pull it out of an FAQ, put it into the product description or the elevator pitch or ad copy. All of that gives you a feedback loop of how to harness on what is most important. And as an bonus, I've learned this one recently, with a lot of the LLM-led search and the way that those platforms crawl, apparently FAQs are just catnip to them. So if you want to rank well there, this is the sort of stuff that they will look for in those rich text descriptions and gives you some bonus points with them. So as search behavior shifts, apparently this is going to be an increasingly common and valuable bit of real estate. So address it now while you get a jump start. And then last but not least, this is a huge one that we use consistently in both the PDP and in the cart or cart drawers. And those are these like value prop USP type of icons with a little bit of copy. These are ones where they're not by themselves going to win the day. It is generally when a store is in a fairly saturated market, they have a lot of competitors, there's a lot of alternative options that look fairly similar. Right at the point of decision making, we want to remind the customer how they can deliver better than the other options and get that marginal convincible user through to the next step. So either under an add to cart button or under a begin checkout button, having something to reinforce against other perhaps easier alternatives. You can just drive home what is valuable, like what is most valuable, what resonates most, any worries they have on like fulfillment timelines, guarantees, returns. Each of those things, this shouldn't be the first time they see it. It shouldn't be the only time they see it. But if it could be a subtle reminder at a very crucial point in their shopping journey, you can get 4, 5, 6% of users through to that next step. Extrapolate that out over hundreds of thousands of sessions, and that can be a gargantuan jump, all just from the things that you have gathered from your surveys, your support teams, etc. Honestly, the same data points we keep talking about, all of these could be applied in many of the same ways repeatedly without having to do rounds and rounds and rounds of research. All right, so I want to talk through a couple of real examples just to try to crystallize how even if you don't do all of this and you just do one or two of these things, that can be enough to be a massive jump in terms of real results. So the first one here is about as minimally invasive a jump as you could possibly make. This is from a brand we've worked with for quite some time, Carnivore Snacks. They have a very cult-like following with their product, where it is like a meat chip for like the Joe Rogan crowd. They love it. Like they go wild for this thing. When we were going through and looking at first-party customer reviews, some post-purchase survey responses, the language around like simple and addictive, and especially the addictive part, stood out. If you look at a word cloud, it was probably one of the most commonly referenced phrases in there. So we were thinking like, okay, clearly people are perhaps maybe actually addicted to this thing. How do we communicate that so it's a positive and it's very clear that it has this like validated potent power? And this is one of the examples that we tried to use to capitalize on that. So in this scenario, it was like homepage hero in a headline, literally adding 3 words, simple and addictive, to the headline experience, tested it, and over hundreds of thousands of sessions, this effect held up to where over 8% more revenue came in for every user who landed on the homepage. Which is obviously applied elsewhere in their overall marketing ecosystem, but that amount of traffic having that big of an increase is borderline shocking. I almost didn't believe the results till we really stress tested them every conceivable way. They hold up. Like the power is there, the impact is there. Even once implemented, the impact was there. So that's one where like 3 words, just finding the right ones, could be, in this case, many multiples of 6 figures of an impact. And it wasn't some massive UX change that made this difference. It wasn't anything that required a new app. It was implemented in about 5 seconds by a dev. So that just really, to me, this is the perfect example of a minimally invasive headline change, just harnessing voice of customer data, using your customers as almost a copywriter, and then turning that back on them in a very persuasive way. because oftentimes that will yield better results than anything you or I or any other professional close to it will be able to come up with. And then on the other side, this is a very common scenario and one that I love for its simplicity, and that is clarity on the product details. So this is another client brand, Deco TV Frames. They have a very cool product where it is a frame on the Samsung Frame TV, primarily, works on others, but it makes an ugly TV look like artwork and more elevated. However, users were consistently saying when we looked at the on-site polls and support logs, they would get to the product page, be very motivated, and they still could not figure out which one was right for them and whether it would fit their TV, their model, etc. And to us, it was wild because it seemed fairly obvious, but we just wanted to simply adjust the clarity and say, okay, perhaps there's too much going on. You see the reviews, you see the shop pay stuff. Let's kind of flip it. Let's separate this out. Let's really allow the most important things, and specifically like the, not sure if this is the right thing for you, opens up a modal, and like a little size guide type of thing. If we make that the most prominent it could possibly be, let it breathe, let it have the visual prominence, will that make an impact? And again, despite what is on paper a very small tweak of moving a few things up and down, giving some space for elements that already exist on the page, that alone was a 5.5% jump in average revenue per user, which for them, especially at the price points that they operate at and the traffic that they have, again, this is a multi-six-figure jump just from what looks like a small change. But it's one that, because it comes from real customer data, from support team, from on-site polling, we were able to really, really trust that that's where this was coming, right? That this would actually move the needle. And when we validated it, it was a huge hit. So these are the sorts of things that it doesn't have to be a massive change to make a massive impact. And if you can start those changes from voice of customer data, from the conversion block, the things that we talked about, it allows you to make a far bigger impact than you would ever expect relative to the size of the change. And that is a very liberating thing, and one that I will evangelize as long as I am in the CRO space here. So all this is well and good academically, but for anyone listening to this, I want you to actually take action on this. I want to make it easy to take action on this, because there's a lot of things in the space that are easy to smile and nod on and say that makes sense, and then you get bogged down into the day-to-day realities of this. So how can you actually put this into action? There are a couple ways. I strongly encourage, if nothing else, to take a look at both of these options. So we have one that is a diagnosis tool. It uses our intra-site funnel, which we talk about ad nauseum. With one click, you can understand which part of your store, based on your GA data, is the problem. What is your metric on fire? What do you need to zero in on? And what can you safely ignore? That is what allows you to, narrow your focus a little bit. And then this second item, this conversion block SOP bundle, we share very freely at Enavi. So I put together our internal SOPs, everything that I've talked about here on the conversion block, all of those research methods, all of the step-by-step for doing that, it's packaged up in here. So I would strongly encourage you, check that out. It is a literally blow by blow of what our team does internally to find those like on-site polling issues, post-purchase survey issues, like however, anything we've talked about here, this is the process we are following to do so. Most of them are minimally invasive. Most can be set up at little to no cost, and frankly, don't need a lot of time to get going. Like you could have a handful of these things set up in probably less than an hour just by getting going with it. So would strongly encourage anyone to check this out. If you have questions, I am always on LinkedIn. I spend way too much time on there. Feel free to reach out to me directly. I will happily guide people going forward. and try to answer any questions that we feasibly can, as this is a been a process to us that is very near and dear to our heart. We have seen the results for it. I don't think it gets enough attention within the CRO community or the broader e-commerce landscape. That is why I wanted to do this. That's why I wanted to communicate it. It's why we think it works so well. So if this resonated, if you have questions, please let me know. Please reach out, and I will happily guide you along in your journey from using voice customer data to actually win in your store.